about these events is I've actually been able to stay pretty quiet. This moderator idea is one of the best things I've ever come up with. And I'm really, really glad that Allison and David Singer are going to be leading this conversation. But as we head into it, you know, we've every year on the High Holy Days, we offer the prayer for our government. The prayer actually came into Jewish tradition, I believe, in the 16th century. But Jewish involvement in government goes well before that. From the prophet Jeremiah, you see attempts to influence the government. And really, whenever Jews have been allowed to run for government, we have. And a symbol of Jewish success in any country has been the ability to rise to elected positions. I think you see Jews in government as early as, I know the early 1800s. I don't know if we had any in the 18th century. Rabbi, you can jump in if you know. In Tampa, I believe it goes back to Herman Glogowski, who became mayor in the 1880s, I believe. And there has been Jewish presence in Tampa government for a long time, and Schaarai Zedek especially. We've always been proud of our congregants who have had a role in our local government, and not just Jewish involvement, right? It's there are so many people affiliated with the congregation, and not all of our panelists are Jewish. But the commitment to the congregation, the commitment to Jewish families, and really a commitment to Jewish values in the way in which you all lead. So with that, and not only, by the way, being leaders in government, but being interested in government. And as we have all local politicians with us tonight, you know, President gets a lot of press, obviously. And I'm always interested to see how many more people vote when there's a presidential election, but knowing that it's really the local politicians who impact our lives a lot more than president. And we are very lucky to have these folks representing us and making a difference in our lives and really doing everything they can to make our lives better, even when we don't agree. And I'm really a believer that we do not have to all agree, that as our obligation is to have the same goals, right? To want all people to be able to live fairly, to have equal access to things they need. Sometimes that's the government's job, sometimes that's an individual's job, but as long as we all want the same things, we can work together and make that happen. And I firmly believe that everyone in this room, our officials and our congregants, all want the same things. And that's what we'll focus on tonight. So we are really going to try to have a friendly conversation. And I'm so glad to have Allison and David leading. We're hoping to have some time for questions at the end. You can always put questions in the chat box, and we'll do our best to see them. And then again, if we have time at the end, you can raise your hand and we'll take some questions there too. So I'm going to bring all of our panelists on. And Allison and David, I don't know if you want to say anything to start before we let everyone introduce themselves.
No, good evening, everyone. Allison and I are happy to moderate this discussion. We're going to talk about COVID and its effect on government. And then we also are going to talk about government policy in general. And I know we only have an hour, but after intros, we're going to do 4 rounds. Hopefully we can get through 4. The first 2 will be direct questions to the panelists. The third round is going to be a lightning round, yes or no for everyone. And if we get to round 4, there'll be some broader, just more personal questions about you and how you got into politics, and talk about some of your mentors and goals But with that, we'd love a brief introduction from each of you, and for anyone who's on the Zoom, if you have a question, please direct message me and Allison, and we will try and get to it. And also, if you wouldn't mind muting yourself, if you're not already muted, other than the panelists. So April, if you want to start with a brief introduction, we'll go April, Andrew, Janet, and John in that order.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for hosting this. This is great. I'm April Schiff. I am the Republican State Committeewoman from Hillsborough County, which kind of is an obscure political position that's party related. I'm also have spent the last 25 years as a political consultant doing nothing but campaigns, issues advocacy, and fundraising, as well as grassroots advocacy work. I joined the Temple about 30 years ago when I married my husband, Gordon Schiff. And we've spent a great deal of time there with our children being raised through early Sunday school and Shazifti and teenage and bat mitzvahs and all those great things. So it's been a wonderful experience.
Hi, I'm Andrew Warren. I'm the state attorney here in Hillsborough County. Thank you to the synagogue for hosting and for David and Allison for moderating. I've been the state attorney here since January of 17. I was reelected to my second term last November. I've been a member of the congregation since we moved here in 2013. My two daughters went through Schaarai Zedek preschool and continue to be active in the synagogue. And my wife's actually on the board now with Allison. So for any members of the synagogue who have complaints about things that the board has done, take it out on my wife, not on me. But we love this community. We love what the synagogue has to offer. And we're so thrilled to be here tonight.
Senator?
Oh, it's my turn. Good evening, everyone. I'm Senator Janet Cruz, State Senator Janet Cruz. I represent District 18 in the Florida Senate, and my district starts at MacDill Air Force Base, and it travels north all the way to Keystone and Lutz, if you can imagine. There are 500,000 people in my district, and I was elected to the legislature in 2018, but I've been in the legislature since 2010. And served as minority leader in the House from 16 to 18. It's been a difficult and arduous year. We all know that, but our 2021 legislative session started this Tuesday, and I'm ready to put my head down, get to work for the next 60 days. I sit in the minority party, so I like to say that you know, for 60 days, we stand up and we get our butts kicked and they knock us down. We get up the next day and say, is that all you got? Hit me again. And we go at it again. But that's what makes this process amazing. There's nothing like it in the world. The ability to speak our mind and fight back and forth on issues is what makes this country the best in the world, in my opinion. And you know, 80% of what we do in Tallahassee is really bipartisan. It's probably even more. It's probably 90% of what we do is bipartisan. And when we take votes, the board lights up green. We're all voting in unison. But it's that small percentage, that small 5% of the votes where our paths diverge that gets all the press and gets all of the attention. But I want people to know that it's not as contentious in Tallahassee as it may seem. Now, keep in mind, there are leaders and there's a minority party and a majority party, and the majority rules. But we're adults and we have the ability to leave it on the field, fight like hell in committee or on the floor, but leave it on the field and understand that it's our philosophical beliefs that bring us here to advocate. So I want you to know that it's an absolute honor to serve you in the Senate. My husband probably 40 years, maybe 50, has been a member of Schaarai Zedek, and I 20 years ago when we married, and people know him as Steve Rifkin. He's a local nephrologist that retired a couple of years ago. So thanks for having me.
Can you hear me okay, Rabbi? Okay. I'm John Dingfelder, Tampa City Councilman. I was born into Schaarai Zedek just a few years ago, and I'm proud, very proud to say that my dad was past president, Simon Dingfelder. The rabbi mentioned who were some of our mentors and what got me into public service at all. And I want to blame or thank my dad. Rest in peace, because he was very involved in the community, not only as past president of the synagogue, but also as past president of our Rotary Club, et cetera, et cetera. But I want to shout out to my mother as well. I was just thinking about it. My mother used to be the president of her chapter of the ACLU. And so mother's no shrinking violet when it comes to important issues in our community. My wife, Lynn, and I are very proud. Rabbi Bernholtz married us in the synagogue, and I raised my children in the synagogue, and we're very proud to be lifetime members. So thank you.
Thank you all for those introductions and for sharing your connections to the temple and the congregation, as well as a little bit about your political backgrounds. So we're going to jump right in, like David said, to our first round. Before we do that, any of our eagle-eyed attendees might have noticed we are missing one of the panelists that we expected to be with us tonight. County Commissioner Harry Cohen was unable to join us after all, but he sent his regrets and he wanted to apologize that he was unable to join us. So we will definitely catch up with him another time. So as we jump into round one, our first question is for Senator Cruz. And we would love it if you would just tell us a little bit about how COVID has changed the legislative process in Tallahassee this year.
Well, that's a great question, and I'll tell you how. Essentially and basically, everyone convenes upon Tallahassee during the 60 days of session. And inclusive of that are the lobbyists who come and work for their clients to try to educate us on their perspective or what's important. So the Capitol typically starting Monday of this past week, or actually for all the committee weeks, would be just bustling with people and families. And now every Monday we have to take 2 COVID tests before we're allowed into the Capitol. No one is allowed in the Capitol, and no one is even allowed to testify before the committees in that building. They have to go to the Civic Center, which is about a mile away, and testify via video to the committee if they have any issues or any areas of support that they want to express. So it's very, very different. But what's really most different about this is that we have an annual budget of around $90 billion, and now we have a budget shortfall of about $3 billion. So there's a lot of money to make up this session. So any programs that receive state funding know better than to really ask for more money this session. They should ask to be held harmless, and that's what most folks are doing. We've had lots of relief from the federal government, and luckily our state has been, they've been very good fiscal stewards, and there are what we call rainy day funds, or our reserves are in very good shape. So we've been okay, but we still have a budget hole to plug here. So there will be cuts in the budget. And interestingly, I learned this when I came to the legislature, the only thing that we must do in our 60 days, we don't have to pass any bills. What we must do, the mandate is that we balance a budget. We as a state of Florida are not allowed to spend more money than we take in. So we must balance a budget based on the funds and the predictions of what we think are coming to the state. And I think that, you know, we may think that we're turning a page on COVID, but we're far from it. And I think that some of the rings that we'll see from the losses and the losses of sales tax, we won't just see them this year, but we'll see them next year and perhaps the year after that. And so that's what I see. I see our belt tightening for this session relative to the budget.
Councilman Dingfelder, how has COVID changed things for city business and city council meetings?
Thank you, David. Well, as Senator Cruz pointed out, we've been having Zoom council meetings probably since I guess about April or so. The first month we were totally knocked out of business. We actually had to defer to the mayor, and we're usually there as the checks and balance to the mayor for contractual issues and all sorts of budgetary issues, et cetera. But the mayor did an executive order basically saying that she was in complete control and complete charge for about the first month until we could figure out how to do Zoom meetings. But anyway, everything went fine. She's a good person and does a good job. Some of the other things we've been involved with was, as Janet mentioned, we've been receiving PPP money from the federal government, and it's been our duty and obligation to distribute that fairly to folks. Especially, we've been doing a rental relief program and distributing payments to people to help them with their rent and that sort of thing. Of course, it's been challenging in terms of meeting with constituents, because just like April and Andrew and the rest of us, we're used to going to coffee shops and having coffee and either running into people and that's how you build your relationship with your constituents and stay on the pulse of various issues. And we haven't been able to do that. So the meetings become a lot more formalized and scheduled and all, instead of our usual Tampa way of doing things less formally. And then the last thing, just like the state, we're going to be impacted in this upcoming budget season. It didn't hit us last budget year because it was too soon, but we start doing our budget in the summer, and we already know that we're going to have shortfalls probably in the neighborhood of at least 5 to 10%. And that's not easy to deal with because it all affects the services we provide.
Thank you, Councilman. State Attorney Warren, we've heard about a couple different lanes here where COVID is affecting things. Can you talk to us about how COVID is impacting the criminal justice system and if you anticipate that there will be lingering effects from this?
Allison, thanks for the question. COVID has had a tremendous and devastating impact on the criminal justice system. The criminal justice system obviously is dealing with a ton of people coming into the courthouse on a regular basis, not just defendants, not just prosecutors from my office, but defense lawyers and victims and witnesses and judges and staff. And because we're in a situation where we don't want lots of people, especially people who don't live together, coming into one building in a room with more than X number of people there, it's really put a clamp on what we've been able to do. Starting last March, all trials were suspended in the courthouse. Hearings were largely suspended. So our office continued to do the work of preparing cases and investigating cases and investigating, standing up for victims, doing all the work we do on the side. But the core function of being able to go into court and resolve cases, either through trial or pleas, stopped. We've been able to pick that up through remote and virtual hearings. Trials were suspended for about 6 months. They started up again at the end of the year, then they stopped again, now they started again. Everything we're doing is geared towards making sure that we are not bringing people into the courthouse where we're creating a risk for their health and the people who work there. And the bottom line is that it's created this massive backlog of cases that I don't know how we get out from under. For those Tampa Bay Rays fans out there, imagine playing only the first 7 innings of an entire season's worth of games, and then getting to the next season and having to play a whole new season, plus finish the 8th and 9th innings for last season. That's basically where we are. So there's not capacity in the system to go back and finish the cases that we weren't able to finish over the last year. So this is going to create a backlog for years to come. And unfortunately, the public suffers when that happens. Defendants aren't held accountable as quickly for the crimes they've committed. Victims and their families don't get justice as quickly. It limits our ability to come up with problem-solving solutions that we focus on to actually make our community safer. So there's a huge tangible impact that it's going to linger for probably years to come.
April, how do you advise candidates differently in campaigns during COVID?
Great question. Thank you. COVID was probably the most devastating thing that's happened to campaigns in my experience. And I've been doing campaigns for 25 years, because everything that you would normally do in a campaign, which involves meeting voters, talking to voters in many different formats, one-on-one, at community forums and civic associations and various venues, fundraising events where you bring people together and they get to know you and contribute to your campaigns, knocking on doors, going door to door and meeting the voters. All of that stuff came to a screeching halt in March. So every campaign, I think, suffered dramatically getting through that process, but it made us really find some other avenues where we could achieve the same goals. And I do local campaigns all over the state of Florida, and it gave us an opportunity to find new ways to reach out to people and to connect to people. And we utilized social media a lot of Zoom, a lot of one-on-one conversations and phone calls. It just changed the whole atmosphere of how anyone would conduct a campaign.
Senator Cruz, you've had 1 or 2 days of session so far, and compare this to your past experience in the House. Do you feel a different level of partisanship exists this year than in past sessions? If so, how so? And how do you deal with that?
Well, I would have to say yes, I do. Coming into the 2 years ago when I was elected, I changed the number. I defeated an incumbent, so it added 1 on the Democratic side, so we went up to 17. But this past year, we thought we would pick up 2 seats, and instead we didn't pick up those 2 seats, and we lost an incumbent. So yes, if I were the leadership, and I'm speaking strictly from my perspective, I would be feeling very empowered right now, and as they should be. We lost a seat in the Senate, we lost several seats in the House. There's much talk about the direction of the state and the influx of NPA voters and Republicans. So people are saying we're looking at a state that may not be a purple state. It may be shifting red, but we'll see. Elections change and electorates change, and what's really the big focus, the trajectory of NPAs is skyrocketing. So those folks that find that they don't want to be affiliated with either party typically will vote for a candidate that they like. So it depends on the winds of the electorate and which way the campaign goes. So this one was definitely in Florida favored the Republicans, and the Democrats lost seats. So in a couple of years, we'll see. What everyone really should be paying attention to is redistricting. This is every 10 years based on the census, we redraw the lines. So we're behind 6 months on the census. And if that doesn't happen soon enough, we may not see the redistricting in the year that we think that we should be. But this will change the lines based on the, remember that our lines were drawn 10 years ago. So you can imagine that the population and the explosion that Florida has experienced in the last 10 years. So if we don't see more seats, we'll certainly see, bigger districts. Something will change. And I think we'll pick up 1 or 2 congressional seats. And that's something that April can probably weigh in on as well. But yep, that's what I'm seeing. Pay attention to redistricting. That's going to bring about a different representation in our state. Perhaps not in Hillsborough, because we see Hillsborough is trending quite Democratic, but across the state, it will be interesting to see. Remember, after redistricting, no elected has the same seats. So everyone is up for re-election. Every Senate seat is up for re-election. Every House seat is up for re-election because the seats, as you know, do not exist. So the census changes everything, changes the lines, changes the fact that, you know, under normal circumstances, our elections are staggered, you know, different people are up at different times, but now we're all up for re-election. So it will be a very interesting election cycle and expensive.
April, do you want to comment on the census and changing districts and what the future holds?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I think that we do a redistricting every 10 years following the census, and we see great changes, but Florida's had such a huge influx of new people. We do anticipate, as Janet said, 2 new congressional districts. From what I understand, probably one somewhere around north of Orlando in that area generally, and another one probably down in Southwest Florida around the Fort Myers, Lee County area as well. So we'll see how that all plays out, because it all depends on where everybody lives, because it's a rebalancing of the districts so that we have the same number of voters basically in each of the districts. And it affects everything all the way down to our county commission, our city councils, as well as the precincts in our own county. So everything gets redrawn, all the lines change, and it just really has a huge effect on what happens. I know the last time we did redistricting, there was the redistricting panel went around the state and actually met with constituents and took suggestions on how they thought the line should be drawn and what they anticipated would be a good way to do things. And I would think that COVID is probably going to change that process as well. So we'll see how the process plays out. Plus it's already been delayed too. So it's going to be an interesting concept to see if they make it in time for the 2022 elections.
Thank you for that. Well, Councilman, speaking of things changing over time, we're interested in what you noticed to be the differences in this stint for yourself on City Council prior to as opposed to your prior 2 terms.
Okay, yeah, so I first was elected in 2003 along with Mayor Pam Iorio, and I served under Pam for 2 terms, as Allison mentioned, for almost 8 years. And then I took 8 years off during the Buckhorn years, and then I came back under Mayor Jane. So, well, it's an interesting question. One thing I miss, and this goes back to mentors. Previously, I served with Linda Salcena. I served my entire 8 years with Linda Salcena, and she was a wonderful mentor for me. Linda had been there 8 years before I ever got on there. So by the time I got there, we finished up. When she finished up, I think she was almost at 20 years. But Linda had such a wealth of knowledge, and also, of course, being a lifelong congregant, I'll just drop her name. But I miss her because we were often very much aligned on important issues in our community, progressive issues, issues related to the arts, trying to control and direct development in ways we thought were important and positive. So I definitely miss her. I'm a little bit of the Lone Ranger on some of those issues now, but I'm trying to gather up other people like Carlson, who I don't think he's a member of our congregation, but he's a good guy. So we're trying to get them up to speed. Let's see. I think the other major change probably is just within myself. When I first got elected in 2003, I don't know how old I was, 40 something, and now I'm 64, and I think I've changed. I'd like to say I've mellowed a little bit, and that I see things perhaps in a little bit bigger perspective. My wife might differ.
Andrew, this question's for you. What is the most difficult part of your job? And contrast that with, what do you look forward to most about going to work as state attorney each day?
The most difficult part of my job is seeing the worst things in our society on a daily basis. I joke with my wife that when I'm finished with this position, I'm going to need professional help. I'm surrounded by murder and rape and people doing horrible things in the worst moments of their lives rather than the best moments. That's the hardest thing. What I love about my job is the ability to serve my community. I mean, my girls are growing up here. I'm from Gainesville originally. We moved to Tampa because we wanted to come back to Florida to put roots down, and to have an opportunity to serve a community that, as a Gainesvillian, has embraced me and my wife and kids. The commitment that people have in the state attorney's office and in law enforcement to solve problems and to make our community safer, and that's definitely the best part of it. The job is dynamic and challenging and exciting, and it's personally rewarding to me because I feel like I can give back to this community that where we're going to be for the next 50 years.
Thank you. Committeewoman Schiff, in this post-Trump era, are you finding that you are advising candidates differently as a result of where we are now? And if so, can you share with us a little bit about what that's like?
I wouldn't say that it's so much as a post-Trump era. It's an ever-changing thing. As long as I've been involved, every election cycle is different, and every party has changed dramatically over the last 20 or 25 years, and we see it in both parties. There's people moving further and further to the extreme sides of those parties. It's a whole different environment. So I wouldn't say that there's really been a Trump effect. I would say that it's just an evolving political environment that affects every campaign differently. And every election cycle is different. Every campaign is different. Every candidate is different. And there's always new and different challenges.
Thank you.
Senator Cruz, we have a question from a congregant, and that question is, it appears that there is an effort underfoot towards voter suppression and restricting people's ability to vote. Have you seen that? How would you react to that statement? Would you agree, disagree? And what advice do you give to communities who are trying to empower people to vote?
Well, I have seen it. And, you know, I think that you can speak to Andrew Warren, who will talk to you about trying to restore voting rights for felons. It's just been one hurdle after another. I see, you know, an attempt to suppress the vote by mail. I've watched throughout the years the attempt to make it harder to take a vote by mail ballot into the supervisor of elections office. I was on a Zoom call last week, and a woman at I think that she was in a nursing home. It may have been a hospital, though I can't remember exactly. But she said that now, especially now during COVID, that these folks wanted to vote. And each nurse could only request 2 vote by mail ballots and could only bring back 2 and stand in line and wait to bring back 2. So she said that it was, and I thought it was so honorable. There was a group of nurses that were so dedicated and determined to bring these ballots in for all of these patients. And, you know, I think there were probably 75 or 100 ballots that they returned 2 at a time. And it was only 2 at a time per person. So they were reaching out to a pool of nurses so that they could make sure that these folks' ballots counted. So yes, I see it. I've seen it for quite some time now, and it's just getting worse.
Same question to you, Andrew.
I agree with what Senator Cruz said, but let me answer it a little bit differently. I think that sometimes politics brings out the worst in us, and the fighting that we see on a daily basis between parties causes us to lose focus on what's truly important. And I've had the privilege of traveling the country on behalf of the Justice Department, and you get to meet people all over the place from all stripes of life, and people are good people. Notwithstanding what I said before about seeing bad people do bad things in my current job all the time, but people really are good people, and they love their country, and they want to support their family, and they want to work hard, and they want a job, and they want a government that just makes things a little bit easier for them. And I think it's unfortunate that politics sometimes brings out from both sides of the aisle policies, practices, tactics that undermine really what we all agree with at heart, which is fidelity to our democracy, to our Constitution, to our fundamental core values. And we see that in different pieces at different times, and this is just perhaps the latest iteration of it as we're seeing assault on voting rights. But I think if we all remember that, as it's been said before, what unites us is far stronger than what divides us, and we remember the core beliefs that our country was founded upon that has made us a beacon of hope and democracy and light in the world for 250 years, then we'll find our way again.
Thank you for that. And I want to give the opportunity for our other panelists in case either of you would like to weigh in.
I absolutely would. Thank you.
Great.
Because I look at this a little bit differently. I was deeply involved in 2000 in Florida when we were the laughing stock of the country for election results and counting our elections, and everybody learned what a hanging chad was. And hanging chads were very familiar then. And Florida has crafted election laws and legislation that cured those problems, so far so that this year, in spite of COVID and the opportunities for disasters that were caused in other states, Florida conducted a flawless election count on election night. And from what I see in the election bills that are going forward in the legislature is a continued effort to improve upon that and to continue to make Florida an example for the rest of the country in how we conduct our elections, how we process our mail ballots, and how we count our ballots as well. What we saw in a lot of the other states with a lot of the problems with the mail-in ballots was a result of the fact that those states don't normally process mail ballots like we do. And so they made emergency decisions to do things differently and did not have a structure in place on how to do it. So I look at it as we are continuing to improve upon what we've improved upon for the last 20 years.
Well, I just want to jump in here as a counterpart once again and say that April's speaking to the process. We have Craig Latimer in our county that's done an amazing job, and his predecessors as well have done a good job. In these other states, they're not allowed to count before election day. So that's why you see some results coming in sooner. In Florida, we're able to count ahead of time. So it makes for a big difference. But let's not make any mistake, and let's be clear about voter suppression and attempts to suppress the vote or suppress registration versus process.
Councilman?
So I was talking about perspective earlier, and I wanted to kind of chime in where Andrea was coming from a little bit. I've been reading a book about what Tampa was like during the Civil War and after the Civil War. And especially right after the Civil War, the city was split with about 200 Republicans who were with Lincoln and 200 Democrats who basically were secessionists. And after the Civil War, you can imagine that things were a little tough. Things were a little tense. And the federal government, basically, they were in Fort Brooke and they said, you know what, this isn't so much fun. And they basically left these people to their own devices. And it was brutal. I mean, they'd come in for city council meetings, and on top of that, you had, integration, because now the freed slaves had the right to participate and vote. And it was a very, very tormenting, difficult time against neighbors. That at one point they tarred and feathered a judge out in the middle of the street. And I mean, it was crazy. But anyway, to look at it from perspective, as Janet says, we're a lot more civil to each other now than times back then. And that was right here on the same streets, on Franklin Street and Jackson Street and Florida Avenue, and it all happened right here. So it's pretty fascinating, you know, to look at our history that way. So I agree with April. I think that, you know, we've had difficult times. The hanging chads in 2000, all that was absolute craziness, and you know, we're doing better. But it's important that we don't slip backwards in the name of partisanship from either party.
Thank you for that, Councilman. And just for those in the audience, maybe like me, who are curious, what is the name of that book that you're reading?
I don't know the name of it, but the author is Cantor Brown. He used to be at the History Center, and the History Center actually published it. So it's called Tampa During Tampa. He has a couple of books. One of them's like Tampa before the Civil War and Tampa after the Civil War. But it's a nice series and really informative.
Thank you. It sounds like it. So we'll have to check it out. And we have reached the fun part of the evening. So everyone can take a breath. Thank you for your candor to this point. This is a great moment for folks listening. If you have questions, to go ahead and pop those in the chat for us, or to DM us so we can pay attention to those. But as promised in the beginning, this is our lightning round. So each question will be for all of the panelists, but this is just a yes or a no answer. So just a yes or a no, but we're going to take everyone's thoughts on each one.
We don't function in yes or no. You know,
we understand this is a challenge. That's part of the fun, Councilman.
Do your best.
We have full confidence on this. Okay, so first question, just yes or no. Does Donald Trump run for president in 2024? Let's start with Senator Cruz.
Yes.
Councilman.
Yes.
State Attorney Warren.
No.
Committeewoman Schiff.
No.
Okay.
Question 2. Will Hillsborough County have a transit referendum in 2022?
Yes.
April.
Yeah.
I think we've got 2 yeses.
I'm sorry. April and Senator Cruz both yes. Councilman.
Yes.
State Attorney Warren.
Yes.
Okay. Question 3. Will Charlie Crist run for governor in 2022? Let's start with Councilman this time.
Yes.
State Attorney Warren.
Yes.
Committeewoman Schiff.
Totally unknown.
And that's okay. And Senator Cruz.
Just talking about this today, I would have said yes yesterday, but today I say no.
That's Charlie.
Like it.
All right. My favorite question of the evening so far is coming next. Who is most likely to win a championship this season? The Rays, the Lightning, or the Bucks?
So we lied a little bit. It's still a one-word answer, but not yes or no. Which team?
Andrew Warren.
The Bucks.
Senator Cruz.
I'm going to give the Lightning the benefit of the doubt this time.
Councilman.
Tom Brady.
April.
All of them.
Oh,
Good answer.
love it.
Good answer.
Tampa Bay.
Go.
And our last lightning round question, will a Democrat win a statewide office in 2022? What do you think, Senator Cruz?
Yes.
Councilman?
Several.
Oh. State Attorney Warren?
Somewhere.
Okay. Committeewoman?
Yeah.
That's funny.
Okay. Okay, so just checking out the chat here to see. Okay, so here is one. Well, we've got just to, do any of you offer mentoring or internships to college students during the summer?
Can I answer that? Because
please.
I have a great answer for that. And that is, I met this fabulous young woman, and her real name is Megan, but all she ate was chicken nuggets as an intern. one of the brightest interns I've ever had. And so we called her Chicken because all she ate was chicken nuggets. And that young lady is now in law school, and her name is Megan Bernholtz, the granddaughter of our rabbi.
That's awesome. Very cool. How about others? Mentoring or internship? I see State Attorney Warren talking. Yes. Can you share anything about that? Any ways that folks might learn more about those opportunities?
Yes, we love free labor at the State Attorney's Office at a time when Senator Cruz and her colleagues are unfortunately looking to cut our budget. So absolutely, if you're interested, you can reach out to the State Attorney's Office. We tend to lock up our summer interns early in the year. And so I think we're actually set for the summer, but heading into the fall and for next summer, absolutely.
Excellent. Okay, great.
Yeah, we always have we usually have interns. We have not during COVID. They're just too hard logistically to deal with, but I love them. I give them interesting research assignments. And then there's always coffee.
And I will tell you that almost every one of my legislative aides have been hired from my intern pool, basically. Most of them that work for me were my interns before.
Very cool. Here's a cool question from Jonah. What role does Judaism play? I'm sorry. Please. Yep, please. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yes.
Campaigns also love free labor.
That's a good point.
And we'll take interns any day of the week, anytime when we have campaigns going on. So yes, and mentoring is something that I've done a lot of over the years, and I continue to do that. So absolutely.
Can you tell us anywhere that folks might actually go to learn a little bit more if they were interested in actually doing internship types of work for you?
They probably should reach out directly to me.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Same here. Out to me.
Okay, excellent. All right, so I want to pop that question back up. What role does Judaism play in your choice to pursue public service and in your work in general? And that's just open to anyone.
Well, if you don't mind, I'll address that and say that,
sure.
You know, this position is really a labor of love, much like many others. It pays about $29,000 a year, and it's a citizen legislature and should be part-time. But as you can imagine, with a district with almost 500,000 folks, it is far from a part-time job. It's a full-time job. So my husband pays all the bills and takes care of everything. And he says to me that that's our mitzvah in life, that I represent the family and give the public service from our family. So that's one of our perspectives here at home.
Thank you for that. Beautiful. Anyone else want to comment on that one?
Yeah, I can't remember when I first heard it, but I heard it in the synagogue probably about 20 years ago when we had a speaker. I think he had actually written a book or something about tikkun olam, about repairing and healing the world. And that was before I had run for office, but I always carry that with me because I believe that's what we do. And I know Andrew Warren, you know, I've done 3 different stints as a public defender, and I admire anybody who in the criminal justice system, because after 2 or 3 years, it used to wear me out personally, because you do see such horrible things. And Andrew, I commend you tremendously, but you're there to help repair the world. And I think we all do that. The other thing I think I focus on, especially this go around on city council, now that I'm citywide. So I'm representing, Janet, like you, I'm representing 400,000 people across all spectrums of our society. But I'm really focused on trying to make sure that our city is fair and equal to everybody, and that we have equal opportunity, true equal opportunity in our community, because we're not going to be a great city until we do. And I think that probably goes to my Jewish roots as well.
I would just say that I think that what I do as a elected Republican representative is a countywide position, and it's totally a volunteer position. There is no salary involved whatsoever. But between that and the campaigns and the candidates that I work for, most of that is driven to make this neighborhood and community and everything better for the places that we live, work, and play. And I think that reflects back on the temple and the congregation as well, that they also have a goal of making life better for everyone in our community.
Thank you.
And just to close the loop on this, I mean, the idea of public service is inspired by Jewish tradition and Tikkun Olam. And specifically as a prosecutor should be relentless in his pursuit of justice, but that pursuit should be tempered by mercy and compassion. And those are values that are fundamental to Jewish teaching.
Thank you.
Just more of a fun question. What's your earliest political memory? Senator Cruz?
Well, my daughter, Anna Cruz, worked at a place many folks will probably remember called Joy's Shoe Salon. She was Joy Greenbaum at the time there in the Carriage Trade Plaza. And Anna was, I don't know, 13 or 14, and she would go in there and work on the shoes and the inventory. And next door was a campaign office for Sandy Friedman. And so my daughter said, you know, I'm gonna volunteer a little. I really like Sandy. She comes into the store. I like her, and she's a strong woman. And I was like, I really like that idea too. So I walked in and met at that time a very young Bob Buckhorn, who had been her chief of staff, but had taken a leave of absence to run her reelection campaign. Because remember, she was appointed because I think Bob Martinez went to run for governor. So it was an open, it was an appointment at the time. So she was up for reelection. And, you know, I was there working with Bob Buckhorn and spent a lot of time, really enjoyed it. I enjoyed that whole campaign atmosphere. It's just, you know, it takes a special person to love all of that, but I did. And I remember telling Bob Buckhorn, Bob, you know, someday you're going to run for office and I'm going to be your campaign manager. And he's like, be careful what you say. And about 2 years later, he called me and said, you ready to be a campaign manager? I'm going to run for state rep in Temple Terrace. But that's where it all began for me. Sandy Friedman was a wonderful, wonderful woman that I so enjoyed being mentored by. And when the Queen of England came to Tampa, she remembered that small group of women that volunteered for her and said, you guys want to meet the Queen? And we said, do we want to meet the Queen? And I was at Tampa U, I don't know how long ago, probably 25 or 30 years ago. But there we stood, these lowly volunteers that she had remembered and let us actually meet the Queen. It was wonderful. It was a highlight, a real highlight.
It's a great story.
Councilman?
So let's see, how old was I? 6 or 7 years old. Mother pulled us out of school. I was at Roosevelt Elementary School in Palmacia, and mother pulled us out of school to go see President Kennedy. And he was speaking at the Armory. Of course, I had no clue what I was doing, but I was glad to get out of school. But that's definitely my earliest memory. And it's not that I remember, you know, what he said or anything, but just the excitement and that political energy. And of course, 4 days later, the sadness, you know, that he was gone, which really was probably even more etched into my brain. Fast forward, you know, 50 years, I was telling my wife, Lynn, about it. And Lynn was raised in Manhattan. And I was telling her about it, and she said, wow, she's a documentarian. She goes, wow, that would make a great documentary. And so she made that into a award-winning, Emmy award-winning documentary about JFK's visit here to Tampa. But that's my earliest political memory.
April?
I think my earliest political memories are from when I was young, the time that I spent speaking with my father and learning about politics and how it had an effect on our daily lives, more so than just when I became involved later.
Andrew?
I don't really have an early political memory like that. And maybe that I don't think of myself as in politics as much as I think of myself as a prosecutor. I wanted to be a prosecutor since I was a little kid, and not even knowing what it was really. But I think my understanding of that job and my memory of it certainly changed when I was sworn in as a federal prosecutor for the first time. And it's just one of those moments you never forget, the first time you get to step into court and represent your country.
That's great.
For sure. Very cool. So we're coming to the end of our time here, but we're going to ask one last question of everyone to take us out on a high note here. We'd love for you to share with us one of your political heroes, someone that you look up to and admire. When you've got it, you can just jump in for us. Go ahead, Councilman.
Yeah, when you mentioned this in advance a little bit, and I scribbled down, it looks like women have all been my heroes. I mentioned Linda Salcena earlier from the synagogue, and then two other women from the synagogue, both of whom are gone now, is Phyllis Buzansky, who was one of my mentors and also basically introduced Lynn and myself, and Helen Gordon Davis, who I can't say enough of, and I'm sure Senator Cruz is glad to fill, hard shoes to fill, but probably tries hard every day. But those three women from our synagogue were great leaders. Also, Seal Esrig. I grew up with Kathy Esrig, our judge, but her mom, Seal, was probably one of the first elected women in Hillsborough County as a member of the school board, back probably with Pat Frank. So Seal Esrig would come to mind as well.
Very cool.
I would talk locally, if you asked me who my heroes were locally, I would say that Helen Gordon Davis, for one, because she led so elegantly. She was an amazing leader, and she's so beloved both in Tallahassee and here. I recently did a road designation on Davis Island. So if you drive down Davis Boulevard, you'll see that there's a sign that honors her as a senator, and it's terrific, actually. And then, her for her elegance and the fact that you never walked away from her without feeling very good about yourself. That's such, she was very effective, but she was very kind and a loving soul, on top of being a very effective legislator. And then there was Sandy Friedman, who told it like it was. And I think that I follow that design best. I'm not sure that people will always walk away from me feeling great about seeing me, because I'm so direct, and sometimes I curse like a sailor, but I just don't take any crap from anyone. I mean, I've overcome in my life so much that my daughter Anna was born when I was 16. I was raised with nothing, a single mom with 3 children who had nothing. And there I was, a child raising a child. So to think that I can stand on the Senate floor coming from and experiencing what I've experienced, I'm just, at a particular age, like in your 30s and 40s, you don't want to be that person that you were. You want to try to be someone else. And then you kind of grow up, and in your 60s, I wear everything that I went through like a badge of honor. So I don't have time for anybody's bunk. Just get it done. Put my head down. I'm a workhorse and not a show horse. That's what I tell people.
Love it. Love it.
I would have to say that the women that you two have mentioned are all awesome women and definitely deserve all of our respect. But the one person that I became close to early on in my political career was Dottie Berger. And she was just an astounding, huge person in this county. And she served very, very well on the county commission. But she also was relentless about giving back and taking care of children. And her legacy lives way beyond her. And I saw her when she was struggling with her illnesses. She would literally look at her doctor and say, I'm leaving the hospital because I have to go to a children's function and I'll be back in a few hours. And she got up and went out and did it. And I've never seen a stronger person in my life than what Dottie did for this community.
I find a lot of inspiration as a fan of American history from the usual suspects, from the Washingtons and Jefferson and Madison and Lincoln Teddy Roosevelt. I'm so appreciative of people locally who gave me support, went out on a limb to help me get to where I am, including the singers and Senator Cruz. But I guess when I think about sort of political mentorship, I come back to my wife. She's the compass that makes sure that I don't betray my beliefs. And the reality is that there are times in our jobs where you get lost in everything that's going on, and you sometimes don't know which direction is the right way when you're in the middle of a storm. And having that North Star is critical. So my wife makes sure that I stay focused.
That's lovely.
Well, thank you to all of our panelists tonight. And we really appreciate your time and your input. We encourage our congregants to reach out to them as our public officials. And with that, Rabbi, we turn it back to you.
Well, that was, first of all, Allison and David, you guys are amazing. Thank you, thank you, thank you. To our panelists, you guys are amazing. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And what an amazing way to end. I just said amazing like 7 times. But what a great way to end, because really where this whole thing started, we've been doing this series of alumni of the congregation and what they're doing now. And I was talking with John, who grew up in the congregation, and asking John to speak, and then realizing, wow, we have all of these officials, these elected officials in the congregation who could join him. And John is so humble and was so gracious in sharing this, but so many amazing models for our young people and for our congregants of all ages. And I'm so glad that you guys brought up Linda and Sandy and Helen and Cecile and Kevin, who's on the call as well. We have such an amazing tradition of people in our congregation leading this community.
Ronnie Glickman.
Yeah. And, to have the question about mentoring and internships, you guys really are a model for our young people, whatever they think politically of how you can make a difference in your community and make your community better. So thank you to all of you. That actually leads really well into one of our next events. Rabbi Bernholtz is going to be joined by his son, Rabbi Bernholtz, on March 10th, teaching about what Jewish law tells us about honoring or not honoring our parents and grandparents. Really looking at how we look to the generation before us. So I hope everyone will join for that. That's on March 10th. And otherwise, just take a look on the website. We are excited, as you saw, we're going to have a congregation joining us at services tomorrow night. Remember, you do have to sign up for that, but we're still streaming. And another exciting thing with this panel is now that we've kind of realized that we can get all of you into one room. Once we can do so, we are going to get all of you into one room. And I really hope that we can continue this conversation and really learn about what's happening in our neighborhood and how we as a congregation can make a bigger difference as partners with all of you in trying to improve this community as well and help our neighbors. So with all that, thank you. Hopefully this recording will be up tomorrow for anyone who missed it. And we'll see everybody soon.
And Rabbi Simon, thank you for bringing all this together and all of the incredible programs that you do under such challenging conditions. We are all grateful for what you continue to do. Let's give him a big hand.
Oh, this is from our next nominee for public office. Vote for Rabbi. I'm in. All right, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Good night.
Good night.